Well, it's 8 o'clock, 8:01. None of us have any titles or authority, so shut me up if you want me to stop talking. But just in the interest of getting this meeting rolling, I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask Olivia to do a roll call.
All right. Longmont Housing Authority Advisory Board members present are Cameron Grant, Tom DeBee, Arlene Zortman, Lauren Selly, and Jean Christopher. We also have Harold Dominguez, Lisa Gallinar, Karen Roney, and Kathy Bedler.
Well, I think the first item of business probably that isn't on the agenda would be to appoint someone to chair this meeting. You know, I used to be the chair of this old organization called the Housing Authority, but this is a brand new organization, and I'm not going to presume that that anybody wants me to do the job. So I would suggest if anyone is interested in running these meetings, I'll step back really quickly.
Cameron, you have done so well. I think that you need to continue on.
I was afraid of that.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, motion second. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, I'll continue on. So item number 2, agenda revisions and submission of documents. Should have received an agenda and packet from Olivia last week. Do you have any changes or additions or documents, Harold?
Cameron, you need a vice chair.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great.
Cameron,
Yes.
Cameron, I would like to nominate Tom DeBee for vice chair.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or frantic backpedaling by nominees?
No, there's no backpedaling.
All right, all in favor? Unanimously approved. Welcome. Thank you, Harold, for that reminder. So now we'll move on to item 3, or item 2, agenda revisions and submission of documents, and then we'll lump that in with item 3, the approval of the agenda. So if you have any revisions, let us know, or Karen might have some input.
Cameron, I have a question. So is anyone looking at a different agenda than what Cameron is reading?
I might be looking at the wrong one then, am I?
Well, it's not following
yeah,
the one I have. So,
Yeah, that's where I was like,
well, there you
should
go. So does anyone want to rethink the election of the chair of this committee?
No.
Let me get back into my actual agenda here. Sorry about that.
all right. I think all is good, and you're on number 3, which is discussing the meeting date
here it
and
is.
time.
There we go. Sorry, now I'm on the right script. Meeting date and time, any changes? So we're meeting today on the previously regularly scheduled meeting of the Housing Authority, which seemed to work for all of us when we were on that board. But this is a great opportunity to adjust that if we want to consider a different time or a different day. But we will continue to meet monthly on a fixed date. So any discussion of other options besides continuing on with the 8 o'clock Tuesday schedule that we established with LHA? So I see no discussion of that. So I would suggest that we continue on with that. We might as well do it formally. So do we have a motion to continue with, what is this, the 3rd Tuesday of the month at 8 a.m.?
I move that we continue with the 3rd Tuesday of the month at 8 a.m.
I can second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Unanimously approved. So let's roll on to item number 4, designation of the 2021 Longman Housing Authority Advisory Board meeting posting location. And I can't recall where we posted LHA. notification, but my thought would be continuing that to post in the similar location would be helpful. But Karen, do you have thoughts on that?
Thank you, Cameron. So I believe that because this is now an advisory board that that advises the city council as a board of commission, I would say that our primary posting of all advisory board notices is on the city's website. We now have a Prime Gov designation for each of the advisory boards, and so I think the recommendation is that the city website is the primary designation, and then you absolutely can designate other locations, which you might want to have be the the LHA website, as well as the and the notices on the LHA admin building. But that's really up to you.
So one option would be that we designate kind of 3 locations for posting notices of our meetings. One would be the LHA office building. A second would be the LHA website, and the third would be the city's website for posting notification of advisory board meetings. If that's acceptable, Kathy?
I just had a question. If you identify 3, then are you locked into all 3 and every single one has to be, or do you want to do a primary and then we'll work as hard as we can to do the other 2 or
Yeah.
1?
Yeah,
If we did that, the option would be designating the city's advisory board meeting location as the primary location. And then to the extent we can get it done just for informational purposes, we'll post it in other locations, which might include the LHA building and the LHA website. Tom?
couldn't we just also have a link over to the city on any of, like, say the Longmont Housing Authority? Just say, hey, all meetings will be posted on the city's website. Here's a link as well.
I think that's a good idea. I think the issue Kathy raises is we want to make sure that if something goes wrong with that link, that doesn't jeopardize proper notice for the meeting. So I think we definitely should strive to do that pretty consistently. But the key would be, let's just get it on the city's advisory meeting notification list, and then anything else we add is just expanded notice. So I'd entertain a motion to designate the city's advisory board website as the official notification location for posting meetings of the LHA advisory board.
I so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Jean, a second by Tom. Any discussion? All in favor? Raise your hand. We have unanimous approval. And then number 5, approve the minutes from the December 15th, 2020 meeting. I suppose since we are no longer the Longmont Housing Authority, we probably don't have the official authority to rubber stamp these, but since we were the group meeting, it's incumbent upon us to make a recommendation that the LHA approve those minutes when they have their next meeting, would be my guess, procedurally. So those were in our packet. Are there any discussions or revisions? And if not, does someone have a motion to approve?
Yeah, Cameron, there is one misspelling on item 8, the word violation. And the last sentence of item 8, if that could be corrected, and then we can approve them as corrected and recommend to the city.
Any other comments or changes? If not, I would recommend a motion to, or excuse me, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval of the minutes of the December 15th, 2020 meeting.
Okay, so move.
Second.
We have a motion by Jean, second by Lauren. All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries by unanimous approval. And now we're on to item 6, public invited to be heard. And looking at our packet, looks to me like this information was published, and that if anyone wanted to join us publicly, they'd contact Nicole to confirm their interest. So Nicole, do you have any information about people that want to speak?
No, Cameron, I do not. Olivia, did you get any notice? It might have been her name on the agenda, Cameron. That's why I'm just double checking with her.
Okay.
I didn't. I think it did say Nicole, so I think we should be good to go.
Yep, I got nothing, but I do have my email up in case anybody wants in during the meeting.
Great. Well, with no public requesting to be heard, we'll roll on to item number 7. Review, consider recommendation for the following policies. And we have 3, and I think we'll do them one at a time. One is the reasonable accommodation policy, another is tenant selection policy, and the third is the physical alteration policy. And I've read through these, but if there's somebody in the meeting who has a little more versed in what we're doing here that wants to discuss this, that would be helpful. Kathy?
So these, if you remember, are the policies that were required to be updated as part of the voluntary compliance agreement with HUD. So we have been working since early 2020 to pull these together with our legal firm. They've gone back and forth to HUD a couple of different times, at least 2 or 3 times. HUD has finally approved them. So the next step then is to have this board make a recommendation, and then we'll have the LHA board do a final approval. And then we are required by the voluntary compliance agreement to send these out to all of our tenants, as well as make them available to incoming tenants. And there's some reporting that goes along, particularly with the reasonable accommodation policy as well, that we'll have to do to HUD for, I don't know how long, a couple of years, a year, I don't know, doesn't state. But these are the first 3 policies. There might be a couple more that are coming to you. I think we still have to do a grievance policy, and I'll go through all this when we get to the last item, which is a review of the voluntary compliance agreement. But basically, had to revise these 3 policies to meet HUD compliance. HUD has reviewed them and approved them.
And then maybe stepping back for those of you who didn't have the pleasure of sitting down with HUD to talk about their assessment of the LHA and the LHA's compliance with rules, regulations, and statutes. They came in and did an audit of the housing authority, which they do of all agencies that they fund. They don't do it consistently, so it's like an IRS audit. You hope you never get one, but when you do, you hope you stand up. They did identify a number of areas that were where they thought we needed to increase our proficiency in following the rules. Basically, they said, here, you're out of compliance in these areas. So we entered into an agreement called the Voluntary Compliance Agreement, which is later in the agenda, which outlined the issues that they identified that they would like us to improve our performance within where they'd like us to improve our performance, and then a plan for how we would roll that out. And it included a schedule, which was ambitious at the outset, and then COVID came along, which made it even more difficult. But speaking to this reasonable accommodation definition and LHA policy, the Longman Housing Authority is obligated to follow the rules under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Whether we have a policy or not, we're obligated to follow it. This policy is just a description for the general public and for HUD, which provides money to us, that describes how we will ensure that we're following it. So that's the rationale. It looks pretty comprehensive to me, and my understanding, Kathy, is that this has been back. Has this been back and forth with HUD yet? And so,
yes,
so now we're at a point
several
where
times.
HUD says this is okay. Our council says this is okay. And so at this point, I'd entertain a motion to recommend that the LHA approve this. And we can certainly have discussion after that.
Okay. I'll move to approve.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second, and now we're ripe for discussion.
I do have a couple of comments on this, and they're more like clarifying. Under, it's on page 2 of 6. The term structural infeasible, should that be structurally infeasible?
Is that of the 504, the reasonable accommodation policy?
It's on the reasonable accommodation policy.
Page
Yeah,
2.
Jean, I cut that too. And that was kind of going to be my question. If there aren't many, but there's a couple of edits, and then we need to change, Kathy, your email
Yeah,
address.
I
So
saw
I'm
that.
assuming
Mhm.
that those items that really aren't substantive, just some minor edits, we probably can. I'm assuming we can do that.
Yes.
All right, there's on item 7, I wanted clarification. If LHA receives a request that can be approved immediately thereafter, it will approve the request. The implication there is that we've received this kind of request before, so we know it's going to be approved. Is that why the word thereafter is in there?
Where are you?
It's item 7, page 4.
So to me, the comma should be after approved. And I think it's just trying to say that we will do this in a timely fashion. And we do this. As soon as I get it, I review it. And unless there's some other follow-up that has to happen, we approve it if we can immediately.
Okay, I just wanted clarification. And then on item 8, if additional info cannot be provided within 7 days, the resident, I should pull it up, but it has the word, please contact the city, the community manager. And I think what we need there is to keep the language consistent. Instead of saying, please contact, it's the resident must contact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then items 9, 10, and 11 all seem to be talking about the same thing. Is that the intention here of the interactive dialogue?
I think to me, it's the evolution of the interactive dialogue.
Okay. Okay. Which is why it's 3 separate items?
Yep.
Okay. In the grievance process, and I'm glad you've had this back and forth with HUD. I was looking at, you have an informal hearing and or the complaint with HUD. Would there be any benefit of putting a request for mediation before the complaint for HUD, with HUD?
Well, so even though HUD approved this, they also in the VCA follow-up have said we need to submit a separate grievance policy. Here it is.
Okay.
Which I assume would go into more detail.
Right.
Yeah, so LHA must submit a grievance policy or an amended grievance policy that contain complaints pertaining to any action prohibited by 504, blah, blah. So I think they just want this broadened a little bit or more detail around this, and so that it stands separate. So we'll be working on that next.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll note the email needs to be changed.
Arlene, did you have some comments?
They're really sort of more of a clarification. On page 2, under reasonable accommodations, where it talks about the disability access, if the accommodation is denied, how many of them, if any, have you guys done?
How many have we
Either
done?
alternative accommodation is available, or how many of them have you actually had to deal with? If any, I mean.
That we have had to deny, or that are, how many in total have we dealt with this year?
Well, it's saying if the requested accommodation is structurally infeasible, causes undue financial administrative burden, LHA will engage in an interactive process to determine if an alternative accommodation is available or appropriate. Does that come up frequently?
No, we haven't had any so far since I have been here that have been around this. I think that was the thought process behind when the former director was here and some tub replacements were denied, and that we ended up having to pay the clients to replace those. So it has to be pretty unable to be modified to deny something, but we haven't had any that I have had to deny for being structurally infeasible or too expensive or anything like that. It's the ones I've denied have been around the letter didn't support the disability, or I asked for more information around it and never got it, kind of thing.
Okay. Then under a notification of policies on that same page, I noticed that it doesn't list other languages. Are these listed in other languages at all, or are you relying on interpreters to deal with that?
Right now, we do not have our policies or documents translated into Spanish. That is something we're going to work on, in particular Spanish, because that's our primary minority language. As we get more stable and move forward, we're going to start working on that, but there is ability to translate verbally for anyone.
And you feel comfortable with that? Is that done by interpreters you hire?
It is mostly by city staff or LHA staff when we had that.
So what we have in place is we have different tiers of Spanish language interpreters in the organization. Tier 1, 2, and 3. Or tier 3 will typically be involved in the translation. Sometimes on legal documents, we actually have a contract where we farm that out for them to do it. But in the event of someone needing assistance, we definitely try to get into that structure and get the appropriate person based on the need at the time.
Okay, so if a person can't read, how is that handled, if they even will admit it?
Are you talking Spanish speaker or
Any of them? You'd even have English speakers who can't read.
Correct, that's why.
Yeah.
I think that's where we have to just inform. I mean, we have to just go through and have that conversation and work through the documents via the staff members.
Yeah, the housing choice voucher specialists in particular are really good at that. And they interpret, if you will, the legalese sometimes that's in the voucher program. They do a lot of explanation around why we need certain documents and why we need this document versus another document, kind of thing. So they're pretty well versed in figuring out if somebody is having problems or an issue around that.
Okay. All right. On page 3, under examples of reasonable accommodation, how do you determine under the service or assistance animal, a service or an emotional support animal is appropriate?
If a doctor or somebody who knows them is willing to write a letter, says that they have a disability and that this animal will assist with that, we'd have to accept it.
Okay. I'm getting to the end here. What do you, now I'm on page 5 under request well, actually it's the last paragraph in that first section under 11. What is considered a reliable third party? It says documentation of reasonable accommodations goes on, and it says, you know, a doctor, a physician, whatever, or a reliable third party. What is considered a reliable third party?
It's really somebody who knows that person. So it could be a pastor, it could be, you know, a member of their family. It could be somebody that is, knows about the disability and what their needs are.
Maybe an agency.
An
that they're
agency,
working with.
right?
Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are both great sets of comments.
Thank you for reading through it.
Any other comments on the reasonable accommodation policy? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the Longmont Housing Authority reasonable accommodation policy?
I think Jean already moved and Arlene approved.
Oh yeah, we had a motion and a second.
Discussion,
Apologies for that. Yeah. I haven't had my full cup of coffee this morning, so I apologize.
I would just add that we move to accept it with the minor changes that need to be made that were addressed.
Gina, you okay with that amendment?
I'll second. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second with that modification. All in favor? Unanimously approved. The next item on our agenda would be the tenant selection policy. Kathy or Karen, would one of you like to give us a little bit of background on that?
Well, this is another one that we didn't have a clear policy on how who's eligible to be in the different properties. We had a lot of information on the Housing Choice Voucher Program, as that's required by HUD, but not as much on each individual property. So again, this was part of the voluntary compliance agreement that we have this in place. Again, HUD has reviewed this a number of times. We've been back and forth on it. And so this is their final approved product for that.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I will move to approve in order to have discussion.
Got a motion by Jean and a second by Tom. Any discussion?
Yes. Item 4.4 mentions the HOME units at Briarwood, but they don't mention the HOME units at Aspen Meadows and Aspen Meadows neighborhood, because both of those properties have HOME. Should that be included in this document?
As long, actually, I mean, we have that information as long as the AMIs are appropriate. I think that's the more important thing that we have to follow.
Yeah, I was just, the reference was made for Briarwood.
Right.
Yeah, and HOME is one of those other considerations for those two properties. So,
Yeah.
but if it's, you know, if it's okay not to mention it, that's fine.
I'll check and see. I think that we probably could make that adjustment here.
By the way, I will say it is awesome to see a policy on this. That's one thing that's been sorely missing. I do have another question on unit transfer. Oh, I think it is, where is it?
Page 13.
Yeah, when you're talking about a household that's been offered an accessible unit, even though the household does not have disabilities,
Mhm.
and then someone comes in that needs that unit, and moving the household that doesn't have disabilities to another unit. The comment is made that the household that does not have disabilities will move at their own expense. And I'm wondering, considering under item 17, when there's a transfer, there's no longer a required new security deposit. So moving at their own expense is simply moving from one unit to another unit in the building. Is that the scenario we're looking at?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's really that they would be responsible for moving their own furniture and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I just didn't know if that, I was pleased to see that there isn't going to be a new security deposit charge for just a transfer. So I just wanted to make sure those, when it said at their own expense, it's simply the moving from one unit to another. Okay. Thank you.
And the way I read this, Kathy, is that if that situation arises, that household must agree to move. So they'd be notified in advance that they're moving into one of these units and that it's subject to potential relocation before they sign the lease and move in.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
part of the lease. Yeah.
It's in the lease for all of the disabled units, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
And then they can't place it in the first year. So you have this one here before they move.
Tom, I don't know if everyone else is hearing this, but your audio is pretty jumbled on my end.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine too.
Tom, you may have to log out and log back in.
Okay. I will.
Oh, wow.
Unless we have a lip reader in the group, we can have it. No? Okay, maybe not.
Is Nicole still on?
Yeah, Harold, I'm here.
All right, you're gonna have to catch him again.
Yep, I got him.
So Jean, it sounds like you've wrapped up. Arlene, do you have some comments or questions?
Surprise, surprise. On page 14, where it talks about non-discrimination, my question is sexual orientation not included in non-discrimination at the federal, state, and local levels?
All right, I'm trying to find where you're at.
Me too.
Well, it's number 2, non-discrimination. And it lists all of the different, we forbid discrimination based on, it goes through and lists a whole bunch of them. And I was under the impression sexual orientation was also that, but yeah.
I think sexual orientation may be state only
That's what I'm thinking.
or local, although it does say state.
State and local.
Right. But these list only the federal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can check into that. 'Cause that I do not know why. Okay. If it says state and local, why those aren't listed as well and maybe identified as state and local.
Okay.
Not that I don't think we have anything extra, but I know like City of Boulder does, but state.
I think you might be right. My recollection is that during the Obama administration, there was an executive order that added sexual orientation in as a protected class.
Yes.
but I wouldn't be shocked if that executive order might have changed in the last 4 years. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Ask us again tomorrow afternoon. It might be different.
Okay. Do you at all ask for immigration status? Is that even allowed?
Yes, they, residents have to be legally present. That is something that's required with federal funding.
Legally, okay. Okay. All right. On page 6, under 5.3 Social Security number requirement, you've listed all of the units there with the exception of Spring Creek. Does Spring Creek not require that?
No, that's just an oversight. Thank you for catching that.
On page 17 under 6.5, where it new hire reports, where it talks about report changes in income when the household's income increases by 200 or more per month. I guess my concern is people who have children who want to actually get some part-time jobs. Is that going to be a significant change that they have to report? And is that going to cause a problem with their payments?
Anybody in the household over 18 is what is
Okay.
counted as income. Anyone under 18 is not.
Okay, that answers that. That's it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other comments or discussion? Excellent. Oh, Tom.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, you sound
Yes,
great.
all right, yes. I had a question on 4.1. It's kind of weird. The last check mark there says must be households only resident. And it says, you know, elderly households of no more than 2 persons, with at least 1 person who is 62 years. It's just, I'm kind of confused on why that language is in there when it says must be households only resident.
They can't own a house somewhere else or be renting a house somewhere else.
Oh, is that what that means? Okay, so it's not the residents that we're talking about. Okay, I see. All right. And then the other part too is kind of the criminal background check. You know, I understand felonies, but like drug-related misdemeanors, and we're looking at the last 5 years. Is this kind of standard with HUD or?
What section are you looking at?
Sorry, this is under 3.1 under criminal background check.
And Lisa might have better knowledge of that than I do, but you know, drugs are not allowed in federal property, period, end of story.
Nope, yes. I understand. But if, you know, a person's trying to get clean and all that stuff, we're looking at the last 5 years. I mean, is that pretty standard?
Yes, that's the industry standard that HUD makes us follow, especially with methamphetamines and felonies.
Yep, okay.
I know it seems kind of harsh, but BCHA has dealt with quite a few meth smoked in and cooked properties, and the cost to remediate those units is astronomical, especially with they share HVAC and shared walls, because then you're displacing other residents. So while I agree it seems kind of harsh for people who are trying to live a better life, it's kind of unfortunate, but it's kind of just how it goes.
Yeah.
Does LHA have a policy around methamphetamine remediation where you try to go after residents, even though we know that that's useless for financial reasons?
I'm not sure that it's a written policy, but we've dealt with this quite a bit actually, and tried different approaches, and I think settled on an approach that is reasonably effective.
That's good. Okay.
And it's a lease violation. If they violate the lease, they're obligated to pay the damages. We just have some situations where they may not be able to. I'd ask a question about that same criminal background check. What it does, it doesn't say applicants shall be denied residency if this is the fact. This happens, it says they may be denied. So there's still some discretion on the part of the LHA, which part of me thinks is nice because you can look at the facts of the specific situation, but the attorney in me gets a little nervous about discretion and how we actually apply that discretion. That's more of just a comment without a suggestion, but I don't know if anyone else has a concern about that.
Well, I mean, my thing is too is, I mean, the documentation too. So if we do have somebody that, does have, say, a drug-related misdemeanor within the last 5 years, are we documenting why we're allowing this person in? Or is it, most time, if it's a may, but we're following the rules 100%, then there is no need for documentation, obviously. But so if we do have an exception that we are allowing, is there the documentation in place?
So again, Lisa might have a better take on this, since she is the overseeing the properties, but my take is that we are pretty much following the letter of the law, and so that there isn't additional documentation. I don't remember any that have been let in as an exception for that, unless we simply didn't know about it.
Kathy is dead on. We basically, this is what we follow. And since I've been here, I haven't seen any. I'm running all the criminal background checks for LHA now. So if there's anything, they're being denied.
If I can comment, our biggest problem has not been on criminal background checks. It's been on people who have violated and have used drugs, and there was no sign in a criminal background check that they had been ever caught at it. And we got stuck with cleanup bill. Yeah.
We've had any other comments or discussion? All right, well, we have some suggested cleanup items. We have a motion and a second. I guess I would suggest the modification to the motion that it include the cleanup items that we've discussed today.
Okay.
And with that, all in favor? Any opposed? We got unanimous approval. So we'll move on to the third policy, which is, if I get back up to my agenda, the physical alteration policy. And I think this is part of the same process that we've been going through with the VCA, although it's a much shorter one, so I'm guessing our discussion might not take quite so long. We have a motion on this. Do we need any preamble to this, Kathy or Karen? I would guess not. So
I don't have anything.
I move that we accept the physical alteration policy.
I second
A
it.
second.
great. We have a motion by Tom, and I think Arlene by a nose. This is the second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Unanimously approved. Excellent. So now we are moving on to item 8, discussion of potential advisory board work plan items for 2021. And as if you'll look at section 8 of the Longmont Housing Authority bylaws, which were approved, I believe, at the January 5th City Council or Housing Authority meeting, there is a section that describes us, what our committee is supposed to do. And at this point, I think we ought to talk about how we intend to operate, what we might want included in our work plan, and any other comments or suggestions you have. Lauren?
I just noticed that Article 7 and Article 8 are both titled Article 7. Miscellaneous should be 8.
I just noticed that too.
Because I was turning to it. I'm like, wait, that's not right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We will correct that. Just saw
All
that.
right.
too.
Thanks.
There's a lot of details so, that we have to pay attention to better.
I know it's so hard, especially when you've looked at a document for like weeks and weeks.
So Cameron, I think we put this on there is, so in Article 7, there are, and in Section 3, there are those duties hopefully reflect the direction that you all gave us when you were still the Housing Authority Board. And so really this is an opportunity if you all want to have some discussion or you have some other ideas in particular, or maybe Harold or Kathy or Lisa have ideas about anything this particular year that you would like to see us place on, kind of, we call it a work plan. It's really the schedule of activities, things that you want to make sure that that we address as staff, bring back to the advisory board, anything with more detail in regard to those particular duties is really what we're looking at. And if you don't have any, that's okay too. We just wanted to open that up for conversation.
I like the list of duties, and I think at least for the near term, while we're figuring out our role and how best to support the housing authority, I might suggest that one thing we do is we serve as a body that can provide a little more focused evaluation of things that you all as the staff think it would be helpful for the LHA board to have support on. So if there's something that you want us to dig in and make a recommendation that might be helpful when the board gets to consideration, I would suggest we just defer to you on what ought to be on our list, in addition to these issues that are outlined in Section 3.
Well, so one suggestion I might make, because we've had some discussions around this, is what role might the LHA begin to have as a partner or a nonprofit possible partner in inclusionary housing projects. So becoming familiar with the inclusionary housing program and how LHA might position itself to become a bigger player, I guess, in that program. There is a substantial amount of funding that's likely to come in. There are opportunities to partner with the developers at the front end. And you guys have been in the past a large recipient of land donations that you have been able to provide a lot more affordable units at a lot lower incomes than we would otherwise have gotten by being able to take those land donations and sit on them for a while and or develop them right away, depending on the funding. So really starting to anticipate where are we going to do development next, or where should we be looking at development next, might be something to more immediately start thinking about. That would just be a suggestion I would have to throw out.
I like that, Kathy. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking back to the several times that Harold made his presentation to us as the LHA and to City Council on this whole concept of the city getting involved. And I think there was a section, if I remember right, on opportunities. What are some of the things that might happen in the positive stemming from this collaboration between the LHA and the city, or this combination of it. And so maybe it'd be helpful for our group to focus on those and put some thought and suggestions in front of the LHA that might help further some of those objectives. I think one of them, Kathy, is exactly what you were talking about with the inclusionary housing process, and others I think are just general ways to identify opportunities for affordable housing in the city, and means that the LHA as an organization might collaborate differently than it has in the past. It's a slight change of focus, which is refreshing, but I think we're a little out of practice. We're very practiced at dealing with crises and reacting to situations that pop up unexpectedly. And so we'll need to stretch our wings a little bit on some more big picture, proactive thinking and planning.
I really like that,
maybe
Cameron.
This serves as a draft. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I really like that, what you were saying, and kind of the second half of the duties, being more involved in the community input. It reminds me of when I started working with BCHA and the county attorney's office there. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Twin Lakes property, but there was a lot of community engagement that was direct between residents and BCHA. And I feel like if there had been more of a mediary, community representing those community members, it would have probably been a little less contentious. I don't know, but I kind of see that that's how we could be a role, is to really work with communities, and like you said, looking at opportunities. Sorry, I'm having a lot of pain right now because I'm very pregnant.
Such a hard.
I have really bad heartburn, so trying not to choke
I
on
hope
my
you
words.
get over it soon.
11 weeks. But working on future goals and opportunities, and kind of take some of that responsibility off of the board, because they're not going to have a lot of time to look at these things, and they're not going to be as involved with that. And I think we really could help the city staff in looking at those things, especially with the community engagement, because we aren't the board anymore, and we don't work for the city, so we're kind of in the middle. So I kind of like that idea.
We're in that nice no pressure role where we're not actually responsible for implementing any of these things. We just throw out ideas and then critique people who don't follow them.
Cameron, I agree with everything Lauren said, but I also want to follow up on something you said. I would like to see specifics come from staff at our next meeting on, and as Kathy mentioned, getting involved with the inclusionary housing program. Are there other things within the city that staff is aware of, where we can be stepping out and getting more informed and more involved about? So I would like to see that come to us at the next meeting.
Yeah, even like some subcommittees that we talked about initially, and then doing some community engagement. Unfortunately, COVID sort of put the nail in that coffin, but it would be really nice. That's part of the reason why I joined, is I wanted to get involved with community and do some of these things. And so Jean, I really agree, and I like that idea.
So there's a couple of things that we can bring forward next time. One is the Boulder County Regional Affordable Housing Partnership Plan, which I think you guys have seen a long time ago, or we have mentioned, but they have an effort called the Home Team, or Home Together now, I think it's called, where it is advocating for community outreach and how to talk to your elected officials about the housing needs in the community. And then a group called ECHO, which is East County Housing something or other. I forget what the last stands for, but they're doing a series of webinars. So I'll send a link to that to you guys because they are providing really interesting information about housing needs in Boulder County, as well as advocacy types of efforts around that. So that might be something just to keep in the future. And the next one coming up, I think, is February 8th. So I'll send a link to that one before your, since it will be before your next meeting.
That would be great.
Any other discussion or suggestions on the work plan? Great. So I presume we can come back and revisit this as we get our feet under us a little better in this form of the organization. But let's move on to item number 9, the city report. Harold, would you take the lead on this, or is Karen?
I'm having issues. I'm having to come in and out. So can you go real quick? I'm trying to, I don't know what's going on with my system.
Okay. So I'll make a couple of comments and then maybe Harold is coming back in. So because we have several different items here, but I do want to let you know that we are bringing new staff members on board at the Housing Authority. So we have hired a new housing choice voucher specialist. Her name is Rhonda Hill. She will be starting her position next Monday. We also have hired a new accounting supervisor, and that is our own Kendra Daniels, who worked with the city. We did not scare her away. She so she's taken on the role of the accounting supervisor. And so we have now the accountant, we have the accounting supervisor, both hired. Kendra will actually start her official position on next Monday also, I believe, is her official start date. And we are still in the process of hiring an account technician. But we do have several applicants that we received applications and are going through the process for that hire. I think the property staff members that we have hired, I will defer that to item B, and Lisa can talk a little bit more about that. She's been active in that hiring. So we're feeling encouraged. We are bringing on some staff members who are contributing right away and are really helping us to move forward. And kind of how we have talked about this internally as staff is that 2020 is really the year of stabilization and growth and something else that Harold's going to say. So
2021.
2021. I thought, and one more thing, yes. Well, we won't talk about what 2020 was, but yes, 2021 is as of certainly stabilization and growth. So those are the comments I wanted to make. And Harold, you might want to now you might be ready to add.
I don't know what was happening. I think I was having the same issue Tom was. I kept coming in and out and losing everything. So if you can't hear me, just somebody raise their hands. So first, I think 2021, a year of stabilization. I think there's a few things that are going to be happening this year. Karen and Kathy and I have talked about this a little bit, and I've got to get them more into their normal world in terms of what they do on a daily basis. You may have heard me talk to Lisa earlier saying, hey, I need to get you on my calendar now. I think we're all moving into this stabilization point. And I think the good news is, and what I'm excited about really are the hires that we've made. Lisa and the work that she's been doing has really helped a lot in terms of really getting us to the point of stabilization, already giving us some really good ideas. advised us, and we've now made the appropriate change on simple things like you talked about it earlier, background checks. And it's amazing to learn the differences you find in these different systems. And so, that's really the nitty gritty that we're working in. The one thing I did want to talk to the board about is as we look at this shift and as we look at really trying to then stabilize and get everyone more focused on what they do on a daily basis, is also really looking at moving staff into the Civic Center with us, because it's incredibly difficult, especially for Karen and Kathy, to have these two worlds and try to go back and forth. And then as we transition into them getting more into their normal world, then it's going to be incredibly difficult for me to do that. And when we look at the number of people that we really will have in the building, it makes more sense for us to bring them closer to us in the Civic Center. And I think that'll make us more nimble, efficient, and effective as we look to the future. As part of that, it does give us some ideas in terms of looking at the facility. I will tell you all, I'm having conversations with the Veterans Community Project. I don't know if you're aware of that group, but they work with housing homeless veterans and providing resources in terms about the feasibility of them potentially leasing the building. For us, that does a couple of things. A, it stays within mission in terms of what we're doing. B, it reduces our operational expense. And C, it increases our revenue opportunity. It increases revenue for us. And so that really helps position, I think, us in a really good spot, both financially, and helps us reduce some of the, not reduce, but really, work more closely with groups that we're all touching, the same folks that we're trying to help in our community. I bring this up today because between now and the next meeting, some of this may be moving from an operational perspective more quickly. And we may have folks in there. And I just wanted you all in our building, just wanted you all to know that as we continue to look to the future.
So should we move on to?
Oh, I do have one more thing.
Lisa's report.
I actually do have one more thing. The other thing that we have chatted with the Housing Authority Board on, and we're going to be bringing this together too, is really the Transitional Employment. And we've got to talk to staff, but bringing folks more into the city and being in that city piece. And I think we're still working through what that's going to look like. That may be something that we talk to the Housing Authority Board on probably before we get to the next meeting of you all. But it'll be what we're looking at is they actually become city employees, and we're still working through some of those details.
Harold,
Tom, did you have something?
Yep. What's the distribution of staff between the Housing Authority building and the city? Are there folks in both places now, or is it everybody's? I mean, obviously, COVID, people are working from home and that. But
yeah, I think it's what I see is Kathy and Karen moving. We Housing Authority contracted for the financial services to be through the city.
Right.
So, having those folks adjacent to the other accountants. And COVID world's much different because, everybody's working remotely. But so accounting will need to be with accounting, as we've talked about in terms of efficiencies. So what we really get down to then is we have 3 HCV people, individuals as budgeted, Olivia. And Lisa's going to be working in different places, really remotely, and working in different facilities. So then you have Lisa. So we counted like 5 or 6 people in that entire office. And for us, that's what I would rather them be closer to me, especially as we continue evolving. But I think there's only going to be 6 people in that office.
Karen?
Nope. Go ahead, Kath.
I was just going to say, there's probably been 5 or 6 city staff that have been pretty much over at the LHA all the time, or at
Yeah.
least part of the time. So we've had as many times more city staff at the LHA building than LHA staff a couple of different times. So
Yeah, I mean, so you had like Tracy, and you had Kendra, and you had Susie, and you had Deanne, and you had Karen, and you had Kathy. Those are all city staff that were over there, and then, you know, just managing it in the world and how many we were supposed to have there. So I think there's just more efficiency if we can just move 5 to 6 people over than have this continue back and forth.
And the other thing I was just going to add is that it also provides the opportunity for some of our existing city staff to provide additional administrative support to some of the housing authority functions, especially with the Housing Choice Voucher Program. And, you know, so we would be able to provide reception assistance, direct phone answering, just some other kinds of things that aren't that we don't have available and funded with the housing authority right now. So it does provide us an opportunity to provide enhanced services with you know, with staff that it's certainly part of their within their scope of work to be able to support.
Yeah, we didn't even get into public information web services in the sense of transitioning the website over so we can make sure we keep it up to date and we have all the relevant information. Yeah, I didn't even get into that piece, but that all comes with proximity too.
If there's nothing else on operations, shall we roll to the regional property manager report? Lisa?
Good morning again. Well, it's been a busy 6 weeks. All I've done is eat, sleep, and breathe LHA, if you can imagine. I'm excited to say that we have hired 2 property managers. One started last Friday, Andrea, who will be at the Hearthstone and Lodge. She is going to be there full time between those 2 properties. And then we will be bringing on Corinne Lindsay, and she will be starting approximately February 1st. And she will have the suites and the Aspen Meadows neighborhood and Aspen Meadows senior. Let's see. Over the last 6 weeks, I've been working on updating policies and procedures, working closely with the staff, trying to make sure each property is doing stuff the same way and consistently. We've brought in a new credit and criminal background check software that's giving us a better detailed oversight and outline of the criminal reports, of credit reports that I don't think we had with the previous company, which gives us a better scoring model as well for new tenants and existing tenants. Let's see. And one thing I just got to say that I've been really excited to see over the last 6 weeks is with working with the city employees and some partnerships that we've been able to form, moving tenants, moving people in, prospects in, and having the senior center be able to assist us with funding for new residents or emergency situations, that they've been able to partner with us and help us and just make the quality of life for some of our residents even better. And it's amazing to have that support in a city. So I just want to give that shout out. I'm blown away by how seamless that has flown. Then moving on to the attached reports, as you can see on the gross rent potential, I just gave them some notes about our vacancies. For Spring Creek, I'm excited to say that the one vacant that has been vacant for 165 days actually moved in on Friday. So that's great progress. We are working on a lot of these Aspen Meadows neighborhood. One has already moved in. The PVV waitlist is being called for. And we have another vacant that has a lot of brand new, almost new, hardly used furniture that we're working with Habitat Humanity to come pick up this week to get that donated, and then we can get that unit rented. The Hearthstone, we have a couple vacancies over there. We're going to have a transfer from the lodge to accommodate a resident. The suites, we have the 7 vacant units. One's the manager's unit, which the new manager will be living on site for a couple of months to help make sure that property's running well, that she has a presence, get to know the residents, get to know the community, and work on that. We are working with mental health partners and who are contacting 20 names for their wait list for their 4 vacancies. And then we have, LHA has 2 vacancies of our own that we will be working on once we get some full-time staff there. Village Place has had 3 vacancies. One was occupied on Friday. We placed a Craigslist, and we think we rented the studio Friday as well. So leaving one 2-bedroom unit to rent. We did lower the deposit from a full month's rent down to $500 to kind of make it a little bit more appealing to those looking. And then Aspen Meadows Senior, who's going through the renovations. We have 5 vacants. One has been renovated and is ready for move-in, so we're going to start leasing that one. And the other 4 will be worked on as the units come available.
Great, thank you for that update. Any questions for Lisa? Let's move on to, or go ahead, Karen.
You know, I just wanted to reiterate, I think what Harold talked about, you know, what incredible contributions that Lisa has made in her short time here. We love it that she's living and breathing LHA. That's probably not a sustainable path, but for right now, it is a much needed path. And I think to just reiterate what Lisa commented on, the vision that we had for how the resources of the city and how the resources of the LHA could really come together to optimally serve the residents of our communities, our LHA communities. We have seen that in action in several ways, in just as we had hoped and had envisioned. You know, not everything is perfect, but we also found that when we have encountered, you know, challenges, we are able to bring together the resources of both entities, you know, to really do our best at problem solving and turning things around. So we are seeing evidence of what we had hoped for actually coming to fruition, and we just can't thank Lisa enough for all of the extra effort she's putting together in the first 6 weeks.
Thank you.
And there's more to come, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But we won't work it to death. So thank you.
Harold, did you have something?
Yeah, I forgot to say too, I know we'd had some conversations and concerns regarding some security at different facilities. We did meet with a security company, and we have a proposal for Village Place that we need to finish up on, but I also am waiting on a proposal for Aspen Meadow based on the renovation. I think part of that is because we are looking at cameras too. That's going to need to be more toward the end of the project, because you don't want to do it and then have to take it off because of exterior work. And so you'll be hearing more of the security piece as we continue to move forward.
Thank you.
I do have a question for Lisa and probably Harold. I'm not sure who to direct it to. You mentioned that Corinne is the new manager at the Suites and at AMA and AMN. And I'm just wondering why that got coupled together.
She's coming from a larger community of 380 units. She's worked with seniors for the last 8 years.
Mhm.
And since the neighborhood and the Suites are both kind of a family comparative properties, we figured that would be a good pairing. And with Aspen Meadows Senior right there, that would be.
That fits.
It
fits.
just fits together.
Okay.
And then Erin is back there between Aspen Meadows Senior and Aspen Meadows Neighborhood.
Erin is?
Yes, she's there as a full-time body now.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, so think of it manager, assistant manager sort of team, but the manager has that broader oversight. And we're finding that's going to work more, and we're going to look at that as a broader framework.
Okay. And I'm only talking from being, I'm sheltered in the hotel now because it's my wing that's being renovated. And I didn't know there was a shift in managers. So I'm assuming there's been some communication out there. That,
There will be, because this just started on Friday as Andrea came on board.
okay. All
As
right.
we stay in level orange, Michelle and I are working together to put together some small meetings for the residents that we will kind of do introductions at each of the communities so that you guys can see the faces in small groups of like 6 to 7 residents.
Okay, because it's just confusing with all the construction going on, and then to
Yes.
have a change in, because that's twice now, it's changed. But I'm glad to hear the reason for it, and it sounds very good. I'm just feeling a little out of the loop. I just want to make sure everybody knows what's going on. Because it gets a little, what is it? And with construction, that we're all kind of, what next? Okay, you understand?
I
Yeah.
understand, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think those are good points. And Lisa, I will echo that. I'm glad that you're living and breathing the LHA. Although these days I want to make sure you're wearing a mask when you're doing the breathing part.
Oh, yes.
That word makes me nervous like it didn't used to. Let's roll on to 9C and get a little more of an update. Or Tom, did you have something?
What was 9C? I just had some other questions.
9C is report on the Aspen Meadows Senior Apartments Rehab.
I had some other questions. So, you know, previously we had gone over that we were getting a Yardi support and Yardi training. Is that still ongoing, or? Okay.
Yes, it is through the end of this month.
Okay, perfect.
And we set all the employees up on a Yardi training system as well.
Okay. And Kendra, I'm assuming had that previously when she was helping out the LHA. At least some.
Yeah.
She's still working on that as well.
And then the other thing you mentioned, we have a housing choice voucher person coming on board. Is one of their first tasks going to be looking at the available housing choice vouchers that we might still have sitting on the table?
We're actually still working on that with Kendra and our accounting consultant. So apparently some of the data that had been entered last year was not accurate. And so HUD and the accounting firm are working on reconciling everything, and that's what we're waiting on. And then everything has to go into the 2-year tool, which HUD requires. And so we are hoping to wrap that up here in the next month or so and have a better handle on what we're able to do.
Yep.
All right, if there are no other comments, let's move on to the update on the rehab at Aspen Meadows.
All right, that's me. So the interior work is about 60% complete. As Jean mentioned, the 3rd floor south wing move out was completed January 11th. We have now renovated the north wing and have started on the south wing. Work during the next 3 weeks will include those units on the 3rd floor south, the 2nd floor gathering room, and continuing work on the 1st floor lobby. We should be hearing about the elevator work schedule very soon. We're anxious to know when that's going to happen because some residents are going to have to be relocated likely again. We were trying to align it with the majority of people who would be out that have disabilities or that are in wheelchairs or have mobility, that they are going to have to be out during the elevator. And it's just a little bit behind where we thought it was going to be. I do want to report though that while the entire elevator isn't going to be replaced, the majority of the components of the elevator are going to be replaced and should, according to the company, leave us running smoothly for the next 20 plus years. So we're looking forward to that and being done with that. Exterior work to date includes the substantial completion on the roof, but most of the exterior work, including window replacement and siding, will be March through June. Speaking to Harold's thoughts about the security system, we don't want to put that up and then rip it off with the siding. The full job is about 36% complete in terms of contract billing. We have used only about 18% of our contingency budget. And because interior work is where most of the need for contingency was expected, we are thinking that we are going to have quite a bit of that contingency money we can reallocate and add value to the project. So some of the things we're looking at right now, exploring the pricing and options, is doing a full parking lot paving. Only 2/3 of the lot was originally proposed to save on budget. So this would put all of the asphalt into the same life cycle, which would be better. We have an opportunity to improve safety at the entrances and exits by changing directional striping signage to one way if feasible. So that is something being explored. The common area furnishings package, we are looking at replacing that. That was not called to be replaced, but with the new look of the rooms, the furniture is going to look really outdated. So we're looking at that and the cost for that. An interior signage package to update the look of the directional signage and unit numbering is something that could be looked at and needed. The security video security system that Harold mentioned, we're getting pricing on that and what that would take. And then potentially, this is at the bottom of the list, but in case we have extra money, maybe some landscaping upgrades. And then one thing that Molly wanted to report back, that she realized that Councilman Waters had asked about the slip factor on the new flooring that's been installed with the vinyl. What she has said is what the new floors have more groove to them than what normal vinyl does, or the vinyl that was in place in the past. And the new vinyl flooring that we've installed is acceptable for UFAS units, which takes that into consideration as well. So it is pretty safe. We haven't had any complaints about the vinyl once the residents have moved back into their units. So we're thinking that we're pretty good with the vinyl, at least at this point. So that's the report on that. Are there any questions?
No questions. Go ahead, Arlene, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment, Kathy, on you guys replacing that common area furniture. I agree with you that it's definitely going to be outdated if we don't do something.
All right, well, thank you for that update. It sounds like things are moving along nicely. It'll be excited to see that project come to conclusion. Let's roll on to something less exciting. a phrase that the one positive thing I can think of that COVID brought was I didn't have to hear the phrase voluntary compliance agreement for a while, but I knew it wouldn't go away. So let's have a report on the VCA with HUD, although we've talked about it quite a bit up till now.
Yeah. Well, it kind of went in the background for y'all, but we've been working on it, moving things forward, although some things did get suspended, like the inspection and the plan and that kind of thing. So just trying to do a real quick update here. We have completed our trainings for staff that was required. So that we're in compliance with. We just have to ensure new staff are trained within 180 days, and that's really on the fair housing and the 504 compliance. We have to request an additional extension to the unit accessibility. Obviously, we haven't been able to get in and inspect the properties with a third-party architectural firm to go through all the common areas and all the units and all the properties to provide feedback on what we need to do to get into accessibility compliance everywhere except for Aspen Meadows senior apartments. So that will be requesting an additional extension there for that, for the common areas and for the needs assessment and transition plan. The third-party certification of the AMSA units, Aspen Meadows Apartments, is underway as those units are completed. And then we have complied with the future alterations policy, which is the policy you just recommended for approval, the 504 reasonable accommodation policy, and the tenant selection policy. So those are all in compliance and considered completed. There is a 504 tracking component that I do have to send a report in on that, which I'll get done here in the next couple of weeks. Let's see what else is outstanding. The grievance policy, I need to get that completed and submitted. We've already complied with the assistance animal policy as part of the 504 accommodation. We've already updated the application and that's all complete. The maximum utilization of accessible units has been completed. Accessible housing list has been completed. So it's really some record keeping and the annual report that needs to be submitted within probably the next month, and a couple of extensions around the unit analysis and transition plan for that. So I'd say we're pretty about halfway done, halfway not done. And then I'll just see how long we're going to have to keep reporting once we've completed everything, and how long we'll have to do that.
Okay, Kathy?
That's obviously a huge, I was going to say, it's a huge task.
Yeah.
And, you know, I do recall when this first came in and we were digesting it, and LHA staff were running around with their hair on fire trying to figure out how the heck we were going to do this. So, you know, it's far from complete, but it's comforting to hear how much progress has been made. So thank you. Jean?
Yeah, I'll put an explanation point behind that. It is a lot of progress. The only question I had is, at one point we were looking at revising that 25-page lease agreement. Is that in the works on some level?
Yes, that's actually, they've given me all the leases from all the surrounding housing authorities.
Okay.
All the current leases in use, and that is on my list of things to go through and revise. Okay, great.
I will just add that we have found HUD to be very accommodating. I don't know if it's just because of COVID and knowing that there's a lot that we simply can't get done, or whether they are putting their money where they said they were going to, or walking the walk, I guess, where they said they would be fairly reasonable about moving us forward through this, and if there were glitches or things that needed to be accommodated. But they have been so far extremely workable with us and giving us extensions and helping, et cetera. So that has been a very pleasant change from the tone that it took from the beginning and where we started. So yay.
Kathy, I do recall that as we were approaching the plan for this collaboration between LHA and the city, that HUD did ask a few questions and was I won't say concerned, but curious about what this meant. Has there been any further discussion about that, and what's their take on where we are now?
Harold, do you want to field that, or what?
You go for it and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, so our city attorneys did meet with HUD and provided them with a copy of the IGA. We got comments back last week after we'd already passed it. So they weren't very timely with their comments. From my standpoint, I don't think it was anything that was too terribly off-putting or things that can't be dealt with. But it has been, that has been probably a little bit more challenging just as far as the timeliness of feedback that we have gotten, and actually knowing how much leverage they have, I guess. With us, we have tried to follow past practices of other housing authorities that have moved into the city or into a county. So some of the comments were a little interesting that they provided. So
Yeah, I think part of the question is first and foremost, what's HUD's lane? And are they staying within their lane? Because I think some of the comments, they were outside of their lane. So when you look at some of our properties, obviously they're fully in the lane for HCV and how you're moving through that, but that doesn't necessarily translate to those areas that are not under HUD. So, you know, on the two side, you have the Hearth and Lodge that are under HUD, but that's different than Creek and Fall River. And so parsing where their lane is, I think, is something we need to do. And we need to have a little bit more work on it, because that was what, for me, was unclear. The other piece on it is to what Kathy said in terms of what other groups are doing and how they approach it. So I think we need to work a little bit on that. But I think it really just depends on, I mean, we're going to have to dive into that a little bit. But in talking to Tim and Tim's response to my email, there was only one thing that was there. But I think there's different ways to handle that issue in terms of who pays for what. And I think we just need to be more clear in terms of where the money's coming from, because I think they were unclear on that, and really show that it's not coming from HUD funds, but it's coming from the other funds available. Or attaching the work that we've done specifically to the HUD piece. And I think that's easy enough. I think the big issue that they had too was just in a position of where the executive board member concept with Meek, I think, created them some anxiety, because I was both a voting member and the executive. And I think this cleaned that up, because I'm not. And so I think we can move through these pieces. I think they're also being very accommodating, just to be honest, because they know that, but for this probably falls on them eventually. And so they're willing to work through this with all of us as we continue to move forward.
So maybe that's our leverage.
I mean, I think they definitely get it. So.
Yeah. So this last question is not on the VCA, but this made me think about it. We also have an agreement with the ACLU that obligated us to adopt a policy relating to entry into units. And I recall discussing this with Jillian back kind of mid to late summer of 2019. But I don't recall whether we actually adopted a policy or not. Maybe we did and I've forgotten it, but I just wanted to put that on the list. If someone remembers that we've done it, great. If not, maybe by the time we roll around next month or so, we could just double check that we've closed that loop.
Who has that settlement agreement?
I've got a copy of it. I'll send it out.
That'd be great if you can send it to us so we can make sure that we're adhering to that. I know that we are really strict with the 48-hour policy in terms of the notice that we're putting on the doors and respond to that. It'd be good for us to see that too.
Yeah. As I recall, it was we worked hard to make it fairly general, where I think it said we will collaborate with the ACLU and adopt a policy regarding entry into units, something as simplistic as that. But I'll find the actual document and send it to you.
Do you know if Jillian had any conversations with them?
So I just looked at my email. My last email was from mid to late summer, where she asked who the point of contact was at the ACLU to start talking about that. And I gave her the information that I had, and then I don't know what happened to it after that.
Okay.
So if there are no other comments or questions on the city report, let's roll to item 10, other business. I'll throw out one item. We've been doing this, but the bylaws, the LHA bylaws that govern our operations say that we are able to adopt Robert's Rules of Order for how we run these meetings. We didn't actually formally decide to do it. I just kind of started going down that path. And maybe between now and next meeting, think about it. But my thought is that it's a little formal, but that structure works pretty well, unless someone would rather have a more informal way of running these meetings. And if you don't want to be more informal, I would suggest that we just vote to implement Robert's Rules of Orders for the advisory board meetings moving forward.
I think it's a good idea, just so that we can have a clean and accurate description of things that we decide on for recommendations that we make to the actual board. And there won't be any confusion about what our intent was.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree basically in principle, and I like the fact that we're getting motions on the floor before we discuss. I think that's helping to clarify comments and what have you. Robert's Rules of Order can get very, very picky. So I think if we use them as a guideline, as opposed to adopting everything that's in that delightful book, I think we'll do well. Okay.
That is a great suggestion. So maybe what we ought to do is generally follow the proceedings as outlined in Robert's Rules, with some flexibility.
Yeah.
And since we're just generally following it, I'm going to say that we're not going to even need to vote on that. That will just be the chair's prerogative for the remainder of this year. And then if anyone wants to suggest a change in the future, we can do that. Is there any other business before we adjourn? Arlene.
I just have a couple of questions, kind of follow-up questions. Has the 2020 financial year been closed for the LHA? And if it has, have the city staff been properly compensated?
So that is what we're working on now. And so Joanne and I just finished what that's going to look like. So 2 points: what it looks like looking back, and what it looks like looking forward. And so I'm going to be finalizing that, having conversations with the new LHA board in terms of this issue, and understand as the executive and what that's going to look like moving forward. So generally what we've come to the conclusion of on this is creating a new category of compensation that is, think of it as stipend for acquisitions and mergers. So it's acquisition and merger stipend based on X amount of time. And that lets Joanne then look backward and forward to try to net that out on both ends to make up for the work that was done in 2020. And then what does that look like going forward into 21?
Okay.
I just got the email last night.
Okay.
I needed to see what money was there too. That was the other piece that we needed to understand what that looked like in terms of salary savings, and work with Kendra on that. And we finished that a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. And the other question I had was, at one time, a person from Spring Creek called in, or Springbrook, I guess is what it is, called in, and she'd had, during the time that the lights were out in the parking lot, her truck stolen, and she was concerned about getting that back. Do you know if that was resolved?
It was resolved in terms of, I believe, the lights getting fixed. I think the question on that one was, there were other issues there in terms of when they actually went out versus when the crime occurred.
Mhm.
Dennis sent us that information.
Well, did she get her truck back? I guess is probably.
That I'm not sure about.
Mhm.
On the police side, I don't know if they ever found the truck, or if the truck was actually stolen, or if it was just broken into.
I recall it was just broken into. I don't think it was
I don't
stolen.
think it was stolen. I thought it was just broke in.
I think her windows were broken because I was wondering if we had any obligation or if we should
Mhm.
offer to pay, but nobody had mentioned that, and I don't know that we do.
All right, any other business? Seeing none, I will consider us adjourned since we don't have to follow the rules exactly. Thank you all. We will reconvene the third Tuesday of next month, which I think is the 16th, if my math is correct. But whatever date the third Tuesday is, we'll see you at 8 o'clock that morning. Thank you all.
Bye.
Hey, Lisa, Kathy,
Yes.
Karen, I'm going to call you real quick.
Okay.
On Teams.